either of the two divisions, designated female and male, by which most organisms are classified on the basis of their reproductive organs and functions. Merriam-Webster's dictionary definition of the word sex is the state of being male or female. Google both words and see it for yourself. In other words, there is no dramatic difference between the two words. But propagandists want us to believe that sex means what it always meant. But gender is malleable. There are dozens of genders, and gender is by some activists considered to be fluid, meaning a person can decide their own gender and can be the opposite of their biological gender one time and flip back to their biological gender at another time. Back and forth as the mood strikes them. The radical left tends to twist our language to fit their narrative, and if we conflate the two words, gender and sex, we can be sure that gender is established by chromosomal combinations. Either you have an X-sex combination in all your chromosomes, identifying a female, or you have an XY mix in them, identifying a male. Here's a clue for the confused people whom the leftist Democrat cult champions. Get in front of a mirror and look at your genitals. If you have an innie, you are a female. If you have an outie, you are a male. Hence, gender is not a function of feelings, preference, personal design, time of day, delusion, mental disorder, activism, etc. It's science. And the debate ends there. But is all this departure from truth part of the demoralization tactic aimed at the American people as mentioned by Yuri Bezmenov? Or is it simply a tactic of those who follow Antonio Gramsci's cancel culture? A good start to thwarting this is to stop genuflecting to cancel culturists. For example, to keep biological men like Will Thomas, aka Leah, from unfairly competing in women's sports when he is not a woman. Let's create a separate category for athletes with gender dysphoria and, thus, biological men compete against biological men. Biological women compete against biological women. And gender-confused people compete in their own category of so-called trans athletes. In other words, we'll have men's sports, women's sports, and all others. Until then, we should stop helping the left certify lies as being true, stop describing a man with feminine pronouns and women with masculine pronouns, and stop letting men of any kind compete against real women in sports. We need to challenge the holy thoughts of self-identifying our gender or slipping conveniently between genders back and forth as the wind changes. It is ludicrous to insist that a biological man is a woman just because he wants to compete with women he can easily defeat in sports and get an unearned, cheaply bought trophy. If a man can think his way into a different identity, since federal law allows people of so-called Native American ethnicity to open a gambling business, can a white man self-identify as an American Indian and get a license to open a tribal, and thus unregulated, casino and avoid taxes on earnings from legalized gambling? The anti-God left insists on letting science lead the way when it suits their narrative, and when it doesn't, they decry the science as wrong, irrelevant, outdated, or dangerous right-wing propaganda or conspiracies. For example, they lean on science that supports their COVID or climate change claims, accurate or not. But when science tells them changing genders is scientifically impossible, they don't want to hear that, and use Saul Alinsky's tactics to mercilessly attack anybody who calls them out on anything. See Saul Alinsky's Rule #5 regarding ridicule as man's most potent weapon when they start their inevitable attacks. Normal people need to jump right back on the offense and not let the leftists make us play defense, and certainly not go along to get along. The leftists also try to label everything they can as racist. By doing so, they must think we the people will cower in the shadows and give them whatever their demand do is. But think it through. We have parents calling out school boards for teaching critical race theory to prevent teaching school kids a racist philosophy, so that more or less renders as baseless the left's claim about systemic racism in America. unless they are the purveyors of racism. A black woman in New Orleans even tried to label a highway as being racist. A racist highway? Really? It's an inanimate object. Then there's another ridiculous claim that the Capitol Rotunda in Washington, D.C. is racist. So our very Capitol building, the ones the Democrats thought so highly of on January 6, 2021 that they called citizens going into it an insurrection, it's now a racist building. So, should we have relabeled the event of January 6th as a race riot instead of an insurrection? Are they confused? Or just stupid enough to believe the rest of us believe them? Leftists have for over 100 years believed claims of racism are a backstage pass to their goal of turning America into a communist nation. But how desperate, deranged, or delusional do you have to be to play the race card on an inanimate object like highways and buildings? Are they really running that short of arrows in their quiver? But they go even farther and have raised a question about babies being racist. They even went on record to say that white people marrying white people is a racist practice. How much more obsessed can they get? Perhaps even more lacking in common sense is that the leftists thrive on crises. Regi, their theory about the world ending in 10 to 12 years because of climate change.